You are listening to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Sun Show.
Good morning, everybody in Solar Panel Land. I am really glad you're joining us this morning. Thank you again. It's the dog days of the off season. I'm not going to hold it against you if you're not actually watching today. That's totally fine. But if you are listening on the podcast later, I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody who is part of our podcast on these Saturday mornings. I know you have better things to do, especially when there's been no news on the Suns for over a month. But I do appreciate you being here anyway, because, just like me, just like Zona, you can't stop thinking about the Suns anyway. So speaking of that, how you doing this morning, Zona?
Good. Rattler season is over, so it was a heartbreaker. They lost by 1 in the Footprint Center, so now I have a little bit of a life again, so that's nice. But tough way to end the season, and it's pretty disrespectful that you would say nothing's happened with the Suns when they signed Wainright and Dwayne Washington. Come on.
Yeah, I'm still saying nothing's happened. Nothing against Ish, but
So you got to admit the Dwayne Washington signing was hilarious, just in the most petty James
how
Jones
it happened,
move.
Right?
Yeah, the whole Ayton situation. It's awesome.
Yeah, so for those who are not aware of how the Ayton situation and Dwayne Washington came about, give us a quick recap.
Yeah, so essentially the Pacers had to clear cap space in order to sign DeAndre into the max offer sheet that they did. And one of the casualties of that was a promising young guard that actually kind of came on strong for them at the end of last season, Dwayne Washington. And I jokingly tweeted out after the Suns should just pick him up just out of pure pettiness. And sure enough, Jones goes out and does it. And he can play a little bit. I would take him over Elfrid Payton in those minutes easily. So, and he's kind of a prospect. So a little bit on the older side for a college guy out of Ohio State, but
he's still just 22 though.
Yeah. So he's still young enough to where there's upside, but he's experienced enough to where you can actually put him in a game and it won't be a complete disaster.
Yeah. So we have a friend of the podcast, Caitlin Cooper, who is a Pacers person, because there's so many connections with the Pacers. It seems like every year, every few months, we're doing something else related to the Pacers. So I checked in with her and I said, well, what do you think of this Dwayne Washington guy? Obviously, she is really deep in the weeds on how the Pacers play and how basketball is played. And she's a really, really good guest. I've had her on before. We talked to her a couple of weeks ago. So I asked her about Dwayne Washington, and basically he sounds to me like a Langston Galloway in that she says his defense is rough, particularly with executing switches, but he can heat up in a hurry from 3, including on movement as a ghost screener, which can be helpful. Kind of sounds a little like Landry Shamet there. Does not hesitate to attack mismatches and has some surprising ball skills with Smitty moves. Not quite sure what that means. I didn't ask her. And shoulder shimmies to create separation. Oh, okay. So he can get his own shot by creating a little bit of separation. But he doesn't finish well around the basket. Likes to use his inside hand on the left side, but that doesn't work. So, his defense is suspect. He can make some threes. He can get a little bit of separation to create a shot when he's got the ball, but he's not really a point guard. And she really said, similar to Aaron, I asked her how he compares to Aaron Holiday. And probably similar to Aaron, she said, wouldn't trust him to run an offense. Dwayne Washington was typically a dicey proposition and didn't happen much.
Yeah, he's not going to be a point guard like she said that's going to come in and run the offense, but I think he does have a little bit of wiggle to him, and he can create some separation and get some shots up. So the shot creation is something the Suns desperately need. So he's not going to be that answer to solve all their problems, but it's a nice, worthwhile shot on a 2-way contract. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. It's a 2-way contract. He's 22 years old. He might grow into something. You'd certainly, for the Suns financially, roster flexibility wise, for the team age wise and potential wise, he's a better investment than a Langston Galloway at this point. No offense to Langston, he's a really cool guy. We actually had him on the solar panel a couple of years ago when he was on the team, and he's a really good guy. But he's almost 30 years old, or he is 30 by now, and he's really only that guy. He's really only the guy who can heat up from three if you get him an open shot. So Dwayne Washington is a younger version. Maybe he grows into something better. Maybe he doesn't. It's okay. So it's good then that he's been added to a two-way contract. And the Suns have now filled both two-way spots. They got Ish back on a two-way. I'm a little surprised Ish didn't get a full season contract from anyone this summer, because I'm assuming he would have taken a full season contract from another team. But once he was down to two-way opportunities or overseas or whatever, he came back to the Suns. As much as he likes the Suns, he also likes money. Anybody would. A two-way contract gets you, maybe as much as $500,000, but probably more like 100,000 or 200,000 at the most.
Mm-hmm.
Ish will be with the team for up to 50 games again, like he was last year. The league has really made two-way contracts your extra roster spots rather than, hey, they can barely touch the floor on your NBA team, which it was a few years ago. So he's not going to spend any time in the G League. He's going to stay with the team. He's going to be active for up to 50 games. And days on the NBA roster don't matter anymore. It's the games you get into that really matters on the two-way. So it's a perfect addition for the Suns. It's a little bit less money than he could have gotten on a full contract. It's possible the Suns said, hey, by the time we figure out the rest of our roster by training camp, we may give you that last roster spot, but they can't promise anything. So he took the two-way. I'm happy that Ish has come back.
Yeah, me too. And I think, and to like a lesser degree, it's kind of like the campaign situation where, when they extended him the offseason, it seemed like it was a discount in a way after how great he played leading up to that. And he just wanted to be in Phoenix. I think there's other places he could have gone and got a guaranteed roster spot. But the Suns also probably mentioned that, we're probably going to be cleaning house with a big trade at some point, and the roster spot will open up. So that's yours. Kind of like an under the table agreement type thing where sign a two-way now, like we want to keep you here. You're in our long-term plans and we'll find a spot for you. So I'm glad he's back. He's actually at one of the Rattlers games recently, and really good dude to meet and kind of talk with a little bit. So it seems like he loves the Valley, and I do think he could become a useful rotation piece. And, as a, 9th or 10th guy that can come off the bench, bring some energy. And if the three is real, then, he becomes almost like a PJ Tucker in a way.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Well, okay. If the three is real, then he's definitely a more of a threat off the bench because he can hit that three from the corner. He shot over 40% on threes from the corner a year ago. He just didn't get a lot of chances until the last several games. He actually played almost more in the playoffs than he did in the regular season as far as minutes. And he made over 40%. So if that three is real, great. But there's a reason Ish Wainright is not a full-time player in the NBA, and that's because he's not that great of a basketball player. He's big, but he doesn't rebound much. He can move, but he doesn't defend great in space and all that. So Ish is not really he'd have to grow to become a long-term answer. He's definitely not by nature, but he's a great influence on the team. That's a big reason they kept him, and they gave him a full roster spot for the playoffs so that he could get into the playoffs after having been a two-way all year, because two-ways are not allowed to be on your playoff roster. They did a lot to make sure Ish was still with the team without having to invest a ton more money in him. And I think hopefully it works out both ways. Big Mark, I think you're lying to yourself if you say no KD, please. The Suns should beg and plead to have KD on the team because simply KD is one of the best players in the NBA, and you're going to want that kind of guy on your team. So, but if KD doesn't work out, that's what the feeling we're going to go with on today's show. Today's show, we're going to talk about the West, and we're going to talk about the Suns as if the KD trade doesn't happen. The thing is, right now, the entire NBA is in a holding pattern. If you guys have noticed, There's a lot of guys, a lot of all-stars, not a lot, but there are a few all-stars that are on the trade market that have not moved. One of them is Kevin Durant. Another one, he's not on the trade market, but he certainly hasn't signed his extension, and he could be holding the Lakers' feet to the fire over that, is LeBron James. And LeBron James obviously should be disappointed in the team that was put around him this past year. Again, they just did 1-year contracts with the people they put around him again this year, so he can't be that much more excited about the team. He might be holding the Lakers hostage on what are you going to get for me now that's a better player than a 1-year signing before I sign an extension. Or it's quite possible LeBron will just move again to another team. So LeBron's holding things up. KD is holding things up. These veterans, these like LaMarcus Aldridge type, a Kemba Walker type, they're all waiting to see the dust settle, to see which teams are the biggest contenders after those guys settle in for their teams, and then they'll fill out roster spots. LeBron should take a pay cut. Well, that would require the Lakers to buy him out. They're not going to buy him out. He's under contract for the next year, and he could become a free agent, but he's going to want to time everything up with his son coming into the league. There's a podcast called Basketball Illuminati with Amin Al-Hassan and Tom Haberstroh, and they were talking about all the stars aligning for 2024 LeBron and his son Bronny to be on the same team in the NBA. And LeBron, if he had his way, it would be on a Vegas team in the NBA. So there's a lot of things that might be's and wannabes and all that, but LeBron's probably not going to tie himself into anything that is going to take him past the 24 off season. So trade the whole boat for one half of a goat. What do you mean one half of a goat, Big Merc? I'm not sure. I'll keep Team Bridges. No, man, look, I love Mikal Bridges like everybody else, but Mikal Bridges is not going to win you a title. Kevin Durant's been Finals MVP twice. So what do you think, Brandon? Do you want it? Would you do Mikal Bridges for Kevin Durant and call it a day, or would you pass?
I mean, you have to, and it pains me to even say that. There's a very short list of players I would include Mikal for, but like you said, when you get someone at that level of talent, you just can't pass up on that opportunity. Even if it doesn't work out, that swing is worth it, in my opinion. Like, you just need, if you're trying to win a title, you need one of the top 5 players in the league. You need the best player in the series. Yeah. And, maybe I think it was PLR that said this a couple weeks ago, that maybe Booker can be that guy eventually in his prime where, if he gets hot, he can take over and be the best player in the series. But as of right now, I think, having 2 of those guys makes you, like we've seen with teams in the past, like having that 2-man group that can kind of just carry your team gives you much better odds. So I think at this point, as much as it pains me to say it, yes, I would obviously include Mikal to land Durant. And he not only is Kevin Durant, but he fits exactly what the Suns need, like from a scoring perspective, to like the highest degree. So
yeah,
it's not only a good fit in terms of just adding a star, but just getting something the Suns desperately need, which is someone that can go and get buckets. Like, just give him the ball, get out of his way, and he'll score for you.
Yeah, if you look at the last 2 playoffs, while we were talking up the Suns' depth and their scheme and all that so much, the last 2 playoffs, the reason the Suns lost when they did was not because Campaign had a bad series. It was not because Mikal Bridges had a disappearing series. It was because Devin Booker and Chris Paul came up short. So while Devin Booker and Chris Paul won a lot of playoff games the last 2 years, including Chris Paul just a couple of months ago, won 4 playoff games single-handedly, including going, 13 for 13 or 14 for 14 in a closeout game. Look, the dude's incredible, or not the closeout, but a really important game. They didn't lose because those other guys played bad. They lost because Chris Paul and Devin Booker played bad at the wrong times. And what you need is another guy like them or better than them to actually not have a bad game, or at least reduce the chances of guys having bad games. Someone's going to bring up that, KD just had a bad series against the Celtics. Yeah, the thing is, your best players can have bad series. You need to have more than one best player, or 2 or 3 or 4 ideally, so that you can you can rely on the third guy or the second guy or the fourth guy to step up for you. And DA and Mikal were not ready. They just didn't have it. And they required Chris Paul and Devin Booker to get them shots because they don't create shots on their own. So you've got to have a KD. You've got to have someone like that who can create a shot on his own. Not that KD will necessarily be better than Booker going forward. I actually am of the opinion that Devin Booker is the team's best player going forward, even after a KD acquisition. However, adding KD means Devin Booker doesn't get triple teamed in game 7 of your second round series, forcing the ball out of his hand, and nobody else can step up. Having KD means Chris Paul doesn't have to worry about the fact that he's getting bodied by these big defenders and taken out of the game. KD creates a lot of openings for the other two stars to make it easier for all of them together. Jason Tatum was bottled up in the finals against the Warriors. Jaylen Brown then had more room to move, but he wasn't fully established. Jaylen Brown, that's why the Celtics would trade Jaylen Brown for KD. They've already made that offer because as good as Jaylen Brown was, he's not your closer consistently in your biggest games. And when the other team focuses on your very best player, that other guy, KD, could have stepped up for the Celtics in those finals. So the Celtics know what's what. These other teams knows what's what. The Suns got to acquire KD. But let's assume, again, we're going down the KD road. I would acquire KD any day of the week. KD was going to meet with Joe Tsai this week, the Nets owner. I saw an article this week. I forget who put it out. Sorry, it was on a national publication. Of all the trade demands in history that have not been met, trade demands by stars in history that have not been met by their team, and then they went on to win championships by staying there. And one of those being Kobe Bryant back in the mid-2000s. He was so sick of the Lakers. Remember that recording of him saying, get his ass out of here. I forget where he was, but it was during the offseason talking about Andrew Bynum. He didn't trust Andrew Bynum to help them win a championship. And the Lakers didn't listen to Kobe Bryant. They kept him, and then they acquired Pau Gasol, and the rest is history now. There are half a dozen guys like that. But every one of them was talked into staying by late in the offseason before training camp started. They were talked off the ledge. So this meeting with Joe Tsai this week will either be KD agreeing that it's okay to stay, and then this all just kind of goes away because the Nets are not going to get good value for KD. They're just not. Or he reiterates his trade demand and the trade has to happen, because more often, if you can put 6 guys in an article saying those are the trade demands that didn't work, those are the trade demands that were ignored and guys stayed with their team, you've got so many others where the trade demand did work and the guy did go to the new team because that's what they wanted. That happens every year. So we'll see what happens with this meeting with Joe Tsai. But let's just go with what are the Suns going to do if KD never materializes? Because what I feel like they're doing is they're just lying in wait. They're either going to run it back with their same team or they're going to acquire KD at some point. And they may even want to wait until trade deadline to acquire KD. They might keep the team together that long with all their assets lined up that long and see what happens. So if that's the case, let's talk about the West. Let's talk about who's your top 4 in the West. And I want you guys in the chat to help us out. So you've got Clippers, Warriors, Nuggets, Suns, Grizzlies, Mavericks, Pelicans, Wolves, Lakers. Who's your top 4 in the West if the Suns run it back? Now, let me give you a little recap on who
Did you
these
just
other
include
teams
the Lakers in that group?
I'm just listing all the teams that could surprise. Yeah, I don't think anybody else in the West can surprise.
I know. I just had to give you a hard time.
Yeah, no, I know. Some people still believe, including Zach Lowe, still believe the Lakers could step up if Anthony Davis makes it a rebound year. Okay. Clippers, they'll have Kawhi and PG. Let's assume Kawhi and PG are healthy. Although, when they were healthy, they lost in the second round in the bubble. I will remind people of this. And they lost to Devin Booker's game winner in the bubble. The Warriors, They played great in the finals. But can anyone really count on those three not getting old at some point? I mean, Draymond Green's almost mid-30s. Steph Curry is almost mid-30s. Klay Thompson is coming off of those surgeries, and he's just not the same guy. They lost Gary Payton II, which, should not have been a big deal, but I kind of feel like it's a big deal. But the Warriors should be considered the top of the West, although I do think they're very beatable. The Nuggets getting Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. back. Neither of those guys has ever sniffed an all-star game. They may never sniff an all-star game, considering how deep the talent is in the West. But they're max players. Suns coming back with all their same team except swapping Dario for JaVale. The Grizzlies, no real roster changes. They exceeded expectations last year, and they came in second in the West. Mavericks made the Western Conference Finals, but they lost Brunson. They added Christian Wood, but everyone adds Christian Wood, and then a year later, everyone subtracts Christian Wood. So I'm not convinced Christian Wood is any value to them. The Pelicans probably get Zion back, and they were, as we saw in the playoffs, dangerous. The Wolves, they got Rudy Gobert. We don't know if he can play next to Karl Anthony Towns. But so what do you got as a top four among those teams I mentioned, Brandon? Who do you think is the top four in the West?
So I think Phoenix and Memphis, just from a continuity perspective and just knowing what you have, those two teams I think will be in the top four in the regular season, 100%. There is a whole Jaren Jackson Jr. injury that kind of makes things interesting. He might not be ready for the start of the season, and it's kind of a reoccurring foot issue.
That's true. Jaren Jackson Jr. might miss half this. I mean, he's got long rehab from that. It's not short rehab.
But like we've seen, though, the Grizzlies, they're deep in their system. They just they find a way to win games without their best players, like in the regular season. So I think as long as they're healthy come playoff time, that's all that really matters. So to me, that's a team that's ready to make the next step. They have the Warriors right there without John Morant. So I think they're a team on the rise. I think the best team, though, if we're looking at ceiling right now, is the Clippers. Adding John Wall, Norman Powell, Robert Covington last trade deadline, and Kawhi coming back to join Paul George and Zubac, Reggie Jackson, Terrence Mann, Luke Kennard, Marcus Morris. That's a deep team. That's probably the deepest team in the league, and they have two-way stars that are wings. So yes, they lost in the bubble and they've underperformed in the past, but I think this team's built a little bit better around those two guys now, and they're definitely a team that I'd rather play the Warriors than the Clippers in a playoff series if we're talking full strength. I still think Golden State's going to be a threat. Obviously, I think they have to be in the top four. So my last one would probably have to go. I think Denver in the regular season, they're kind of a team that knows how to kind of walk through and get 50 wins somehow with Jokic leading the way. And then now with Murray back and maybe Porter Jr. back, they're a team that'll probably make some noise. Dallas, I think, yes, they just kicked our ass in Game 7, but losing Brunson's going to hurt a lot. And I think the less shot creation around Luka and just adding, Christian Wood and JaVale McGee, who are suspect defenders, I don't think they got better personally. But I think, if Luka continues to get better, that's all that really matters. He can kind of carry them.
Have you seen the pictures of Luka lately that he now looks skinny?
Oh Lord, off-season photos will be the death of me.
Remember last off-season, all the photos were about how skinny Nikola Jokic had gotten, right? Do you remember that? Like he suddenly was going to come back svelte. Yeah. And then he looked exactly the same this past year.
I just ignore any off-season photos. Just ignore that stuff. People are just bored, and I don't know. They like to create these false narratives and storylines and try to get excited. It's a long off season, so I get it. But. So
Hitman X says the Kings should get some attention. Okay, but not top four in the West. We're talking top four in the West. I think the only attention they should get is, will they get their 16th straight non-playoff season?
They're going to make the play-in. That was my hot take.
You think so?
I think they're better than the Lakers. That's my take.
Dean St. Louis says next year is going to be a real dogfight. All I'll say is every year is a dogfight. every year the West is supposed to be better, and every year there's something different that happens. The Suns and Grizzlies finishing 1 and 2 in the West was never was supposed to have happened this past year. So things happen every year.
Pelicans.
Big Merc is on a run here. He's saying he's questioning my take, Big Merc, that Klay Thompson's not the same guy after injuries, but Kevin Durant is still an awesome GOAT after his injuries. That's conflicting. No, I'm just looking at their post-injury play. Kevin Durant averaged 37-7 after coming back. He's been incredible after coming back. Klay Thompson has not been incredible. Klay Thompson did not have a look at his stats. Look at who he is. He's not the same guy. He's really not. I'm not talking about injuries making you not good. I'm talking about who you are after the injuries.
Yeah, I think another team that's going to take that next step is the Pelicans. I mean, we saw it firsthand in the first round without Zion, how they kind of pushed us to the edge. I think that's a team that if they can keep Zion healthy somehow, and that's a big if, but if they can, like that's a very scary team. And same with the Timberwolves, if they can figure out how to play those two bigs, like, and Anthony Edwards takes another step, like that's an interesting team. So the West is tough. It's deep. It's nice that the Spurs are tanking, and Jazz will probably join them soon. So there's at least a couple teams throwing the towel, but it's 1 through 12. It's pretty deep.
Yeah. Hitman X, LOL, Dave. Kings have a nice roster. Look, I'm telling you, 15 years out of the playoffs, I am not going to, in August, on the 6th, predict them to be top 4 in the West. Just not. Show me something. Show me anything. Anything. Okay. So everyone thinks Klay is going to be his old self at early 30s. Like he was in 2017. Go for it, guys. Believe what you want to believe. I ain't stopping you. My top 4 in the West. I think the Clippers are definitely the top team in the West, assuming that Kawhi and PG are healthy. I really do. They have so many good players that they can withstand guys being in and out of the lineup all year, which is important because when we're talking about top 4 in the West, we're not talking about ability to win playoff series necessarily. We're talking about winning regular season games. The more depth you have, the more likely you win a lot of games.
And
For
they
the
have
same
Ty
reason
Lue.
I think, what's that?
And they have Ty Lue, who's just an awesome coach. Like
Ty Lue can do anything he wants with a team. Exactly. He's a very, very good coach. He didn't get as much credit when he was coaching LeBron as a rookie coach, but he really knows how to make adjustments and get the most out of his team. So although that, okay. That was Doc Rivers, wasn't it? The Clippers in the second round loss with Kawhi and PG. So we'll see what happens this next round. I do think the Clippers are the most dangerous team. And I think if Kawhi is supreme Kawhi, they can win the whole thing. But if Kawhi is not supreme Kawhi, depth is not going to win the whole thing, just like it didn't for the Suns. Warriors, they've shown they can win in the playoffs, but during the regular season, how many games are they going to win? Are they going to be first in the regular season? I don't know. They're good, but I think they're going to be top 4 for sure in the West. The Warriors are still here, folks. They're not going anywhere. When they're most dangerous is the playoffs, if they can stay healthy. That's a question, though. If they can stay healthy, if they don't get old. So Nuggets, I'm a little worried about the Nuggets being really good, but I'm in the regular season, but I'm not as worried about them in the playoffs until they prove it. The Grizzlies, I do think they'll regress a little bit. So I'm going to go Clippers, Warriors, Nuggets, and Suns with a dark horse for a top 4 seed being the Pelicans if Zion Williams becomes the Zion Williams people thought he should be and could be.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I think they're ready to take that step. And Ingram kind of looked like a superstar against the Suns there in stretches. So all those rookies too, like Alvarado and Herb Jones, they're just the most annoying pests. But that's definitely a league pass team next year.
Yep. So says Jay. He doesn't know how to type. I think he's trying to type really fast. What blasphemy did I just walk into? I don't know what you heard, man. Who knows what you heard?
Probably walked in as we're talking about the Kings as a top 4 seed.
Oh, probably, because they're not.
Who knows?
So Clippers, Warriors, Nuggets, Suns. Those are my top 4 in the West. I don't think the Lakers have enough to get that far during the regular season. Wait, we're not talking about the East, Justin, though. So says Jay. We're not talking about how much I love Giannis. So I don't know what blasphemy you think you heard, but so the Suns are running it back. Do you think Dario will help the Suns win more regular season games than JaVale McGee did? Brandon.
If we're talking about a full strength Dario that knows the system and has built up chemistry with guys like Campaign and that second unit, I think he helps more offensively. Defensively, he's still very limited. I mean, JaVale McGee was also limited in a different way. But I think it's just nice to have a change of pace big, because you have Bismack who kind of can play that JaVale role in a way. But you also have Dario who can stretch the floor and give you a different look, which is what I think they're missing in that Dallas series. So I think just having different looks as your backup bigs is going to be huge. And that's a big reason why, Dario is kind of the unsung hero of the bench unit. And, he's not a real needle mover by any means, but he's someone that can definitely help with the flow of the offense and just giving you that different look up top.
Yeah, we've got a Tom Edson in the chat says Dario unlocks pain. I think that's very true. Dario is a passer. He's a connector. I think people are also going to like the bits and pieces they see of Jock Landale. Jock Landale is going to be that kind of Frank Kaminsky type, where he comes in, if there's injuries or COVID or whatever it is, he'll suddenly get a bigger role, but otherwise he'll just be a cheerleader on the bench. When he does come in, you're going to see a lot of connector abilities with him. Dario has connector abilities too. Dario is he's not a top line guy, but he's a really good connector. He can play with the starting unit. He can play with the backups. He can help the backups be better in playmaking. I'm looking forward to seeing Dario again. As much as I loved JaVale is a highlight reel, great highlight reel, right? Loves his blocks, loves his dunks. But he didn't really do a whole lot else for the Suns. And Dario does a whole lot else that just doesn't show up in the box score. So I don't know that Dario wins the Suns any more regular season games. I think it's probably a toss-up. I think in the playoffs it's probably, but it's not a step back, is what I'm getting at. They just do different things. The Suns will look a little different with them in the lineup, one versus the other. But I do believe the Suns didn't lose anything necessarily by losing JaVale McGee.
Yeah. And I think having McGee and Bismack come back was never a real option. Like, you don't need two of those guys, backing up Ayton, who kind of fits that same profile, but obviously a much better player. But, it was just kind of good to see them go and get someone like Jock and have Dario coming back to the guys that just fit their system to a T. So, they're just preparing, I think, for if that KD trade does happen, just having that extra depth. So, I really like the Landale signing. I think he'll end up being a fan favorite at some point.
Yeah, Ted Lubin in the chat. JaVale is a way better defender than Dario.
Better rim protector. Can't move.
A better rim. He's a better highlight defender.
Yes.
But he's a turnstile in the perimeter. Despite the steal and dunk that he did on Luka, after that, JaVale hardly played in the rest of the series. There's a reason he hardly played the rest of the series. There is a, let's see, shoot, I lost it. But there was there it is, right above this comment. Todd Edson, I legitimately think if we had Dario, the finals against the Bucks may have ended differently. I don't know that Dario would have been helpful against Giannis, but he could have played in a too big lineup next to Ayton and defended Brook Lopez better than anybody else the Suns had. So I do think the finals might have ended differently because the games were so close. And really they were down to the one big with Ayton. So I do agree with you there. I also think JaVale would have helped in that finals too. It's just that the 2022 playoffs played out differently. We played against different teams. And the addition of Dario or JaVale probably would not have helped against the Mavs. other guys needed to have stepped up against the Mavs that didn't. So it is what it is. Dario's not going to win you a championship, but he might have made a difference in that series for sure. So any other comments about the top four in the West before we move on to our next section?
No, there's just a lot of ifs at this point, and like if they stay healthy, if they do this, if they don't age a ton. So I think there's a lot of question marks, but this is also one of the deepest, set of teams that we've had in a while. I think because just listing 5 or 6 teams that could be top 4 seeds plus that next tier of teams, like all being super competitive. Like, this is what the West is all about. It's kind of feels like last year it kind of took a step back in a way, a little bit to the East, but at this point, I think there's no denying that it's the top conference again.
Okay, so at this time, at halftime of the show, I just want to throw something out there. I know a lot of you don't follow our Twitter account, Sun Solar Panel, on Twitter. We have, but you probably should be, because we have a promotion going on right now with our basketball podcast network that we're a part of with our DraftKings sponsor. I have a tweet out there. If you look at the Sun Solar Panel Twitter account, you'll see that the last post made on there is a tweet that we're having an NBA jersey giveaway. The account of the 30 or so NBA podcasts on this basketball podcast network, the account that gets the most retweets, there it is. Hey, Mr. Graphics, thank you very much. Go to our account. The account that gets the most retweets gets to give away the jersey. There's one jersey. If you go Sun Solar Panel, all one word, Sun Solar Panel on Twitter, find our most recent post, you retweet it, tag a couple of friends, follow the pod, follow the network, you're in the contest, and you can help me possibly pick out a jersey to give to one of you guys. An NBA jersey, so obviously I'll make it a Suns jersey. Suns jersey of your choosing.
Kevin Durant, Suns jersey. Speak it into existence.
Yeah. We could speak it into existence. You can get a number 7 jersey, Kevin Johnson, and then just change the name, put a little tag over top or something like that. So go to our Twitter account. That's on Twitter at Sun Solar Panel, and you can win a chance to get a jersey. Go over there and do that, hit the retweet and all that. Just follow the easy instructions. It takes you 14 seconds. Easy. All right, next section here of the podcast today is I want us to talk about what if we don't get KD and the Suns just run it back. They think actually that I think that if the Suns don't get KD, they're going to stick with what they have until the trade deadline. At the trade deadline, we might see whatever, but the Suns I think they're going to stick with what they have. If they do, I want to ask you 2 questions, Brandon. I want to ask the chatters these 2 questions as well. The first question is, what is the biggest guaranteed, most for sure thing you're going to see from this Suns team in 22-23 season that you have no doubt is going to happen? What's the biggest guarantee you see from this lineup for 22-23?
You mean just like what happens in the regular season as a whole?
Yeah, no matter what happens, whatever happens, whatever, guys get better, guys get worse, whatever. What's the guarantee 100% is going to happen to the Suns in the regular season?
I had one. I just don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to say it out loud. I'll move on to the other one. I think they're going to play their brand of ball. They're going to win probably 55, 60 games again, and the national media is not really going to care, and NBA Twitter is going to just kind of have that Game 7 taste in their mouth, and they're going to have to be in prove it mode pretty much all season long. And it's going to have to carry over in the playoffs too. So because after that performance, I think that's just going to be in the back of their minds too. So I'm excited to see, last year we called it like the revenge tour a little bit, but I think this year it's going to be a different type of feel. So I think we're going to see a motivated Devin Booker. I think they're going to be shooting for 60 plus wins again. And, maybe they don't take the regular season as serious as they did last year, just because they know that it's just about getting hot at the right time, trying to get in the playoffs on a good note. So I think just being a little smarter about how they approach the regular season could also be something that we see sort of like that Bucks approach where they fell short all those years. And, then the year they won the finals, they kind of, I wouldn't say coasted in the regular season, but they paced themselves. So I think that's one thing we could see. As good as I think the team will still be, it might not be anywhere close to the 64 wins. And that could be by design. And I'm not saying they're going to try to lose by any means, but they're just it's a marathon, not a sprint. So that's the biggest thing I think we'll see. There could be some more resting of back-to-backs, stuff like that.
So there is a possibility that this team finally hit the wall and couldn't get up as of April 1st, basically, once they got that 60th win, or even if you want to say the 62nd, 63rd win to guarantee. I think that it's possible, not probable, but possible, they hit a mental wall where they suddenly couldn't come back to their hyper focus that they had for 2 straight years. This team went 2 straight years winning every possible play, not just game, not just series, not just every possible play. They were hyper focused, and all of a sudden that focus was gone as soon as they hit that 60th win. And they held on long enough to get that 63rd and then 64 and all that, but really they were not the same team after they got that 60th win. And I really think, every team has a really down period. And they said lame answers after Game 7. They're like, man, we picked the worst time to have the worst game. But, those games do happen. And so what? Here's what I think. I think the biggest guarantee is one of the first things we hear out of Monty Williams' mouth, and the whole thing he'll say every post game, every game for 2 months is similar to what you said, Brandon, which is, we can't worry about every game anymore. We spent all last year worried about every single game. Remember, they wanted little wins. They wanted that 18-game win streak. They wanted to celebrate every little milestone along the way. And that requires hyper-focus the whole time. I think this year they're going to take it a little bit easier. That doesn't mean they're going to win a lot less games. It just means they're going to care a little bit less about every single win during the season next year. So we're probably going to see, what we didn't see last year? We didn't see losses to bad teams. We saw them beat almost every bad team. And that's a sign of being hyper-focused. I think this year we'll see a few more losses to bad teams, and everyone's going to go, oh my God. And then they're going to win against the good teams. So I think they're going to come back down to earth a little bit, but I still think that's 55 to 60 wins.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a big fall off. I think that's probably 2nd, 3rd seed in the West. It could even be 1st seed in the West. That's the part that matters, is what you said, Brandon, that they're playing their best ball in April, not their worst ball in April.
Yep.
And that's what they're going to be shooting for, and that's going to be talking about. I think that's the biggest guarantee.
Definitely. And I think, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be April. It's like, because there is like a little bit of like a period between like the regular season ending and the playoffs starting. So if you can get locked in and like you're all on the same page heading into the playoffs and in the first round, like we saw against the Pelicans, they did not look like the Suns that, we were accustomed to seeing in that series. So I think even if you start off the first round on a high note and, some shooters get hot, that carries over the rest of the playoffs. So I don't think like ending on like a 5-game win streak in April with teams resting their guys is going to be something that's necessarily going to translate. It's just more about, how you're entering the playoffs and, just how that first series goes. Because I think we saw how the momentum from the Lakers series in the first round, it seemed like down 2-1, things were rough, and then they just completely tore them apart and used that confidence to carry them through the next couple of rounds. So I think getting hot in the playoffs is also a thing that can happen, and that's probably the most important thing. So, but I think all this experience is great for them. If they do run it back and keep this core together, just all the battles they've been through together, there is value in that. So I think those late game situations and in the clutch, one thing I also want to touch on is like people aren't talking about it a lot, but that Booker injury after he scored 31 in the first half against the Pelicans, he was never really he was looking like
he was never the same.
He's arrived. Like this is like the Booker we've been waiting for. And then unfortunately the hamstring injury happens and he was never truly the same. Like he was still as good as you can be coming back from an injury like that soon. But man, the playoffs could have been so much different if that hamstring injury doesn't happen. Like that series could have been over a lot sooner. Maybe they're more well rested against the Mavs. Like, I mean, that's just, that's tough. So.
Hey, yeah. So we've got a couple of negative people on guarantees, and we got to give some air to both sides of it. We've got one guy saying that CP3 will play too many minutes. Yes, of course. He always does. So says Jay, a guaranteed championship. Of course, he's trying to jinx it. But back on the negative side, Monty will find another Abdul Nader type to give too many minutes to. That's probably true. Let's see. Monty. Oh, and those Suns. Monty won't adjust to game plans. Every coach can grow. Monty's got to know he's got to be able to grow. He self-admitted several times this past year, especially during the playoffs, that he is predisposed to pushing through with the guys he believes in. When the guys he believes in aren't playing as well, he keeps them out there anyway, hoping they'll break through. He overplayed the wrong guys and underplayed other guys who might have done better or at least he didn't. Obviously he knows he didn't do everything right. Will he ever change? We don't know. Doc Rivers is still the same coach. He won Coach of the Year once. He's won championship, but he's still frustrating as hell because he overplays the wrong guys. Who knows if Monty Williams is going to grow from that? I think the Suns can win a championship with Monty Williams, but the way it is now, he's putting too much faith in Chris Paul, and he's riding Devin Booker a little bit much on if he's injured, and he's allowing Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton not to step up. So that Monty's going to have to grow for sure. Let's see. I
disagree with that last part a little bit. I don't think he's not allowing Mikal and Ayton to not grow. I think some of that's on them. Like, you have to do stuff outside the system and be aggressive. But there's ways they can get them more involved. I agree. But I think those two guys have to step up offensively and just be more aggressive.
More.
Yeah,
that's true. They have to want it more. So. Zach Lowe made a comment of the Suns when Zach Lowe was talking about it with Michael Schwartz this week, who used to run valleyofthesuns.com, really great website in its day, no longer as the same. But back then they were really, really good because they had Michael Schwartz and Mike Schmitz, who are now both at ESPN. Schwartz was on with Zach Lowe, and Zach Lowe continued his trope that he's been saying for 2 years now, and he can't get off of it. And I want to ask your opinion, Brandon. Zach Lowe says, I don't care that the Suns were third on offense this year and they were seventh on offense a year ago. I don't care that the Suns were the number 1 or 2 offense in the playoffs this past year alone. He goes, what I care about is they cannot keep defying all the odds and taking mid-range shots to win games. They've got to change their shot profile. They've got to take more threes. They've got to take more shots at the rim, or they won't win a championship unless they change their shot profile. What do you think about that?
So I get the line of thinking. I disagree, though. I think the Suns' biggest problem offensively is they're too predictable, and they don't have that X factor that you can, unless Booker's in that mode where he just can't miss and he's taking over games. They don't have that person you can just get an easy bucket from, and that's in the playoffs. That's what we're talking about. So in the regular season, their offense just hums as a whole, and like their offense was good in this last playoff run too, but they're also very easy to game plan for in certain scenarios. Like if you have the personnel, that's a big if. Not every team can do it, but I think the biggest thing is just finding something to break that, and that's what Kevin Durant is. He's a game plan breaker. He changes the entire dynamic of how you defend Booker and CP, and having Chris Paul, DeAndre in pick and roll with Booker and KD on each wing. Like, how are you going to guard that? You're not. So I agree. The Suns offense, there's some areas where they're kind of capped out a little bit, which is weird to say because they are an elite offense. But I don't think the shot profiles need to change. I think just a couple personnel changes, whether it's going out and getting someone like a Jordan Clarkson or someone that can help with that scoring burden. Yeah, I think at this point it's just more of personnel than it is adjusting with what they have. I don't think they should change the way they're playing.
Here's my take on the whole thing. He's focusing on the wrong side of the ball. That's my take. Why are you worried about the offense that even in the playoffs was still the 1 or 2 offense in the playoffs? They were the number 3 offense in the regular season. There's a really the offense is not the problem. I understand you've got to have a guy who in the clutch can break down the other team. That's Kevin Durant. But you know what Kevin Durant's going to do? Take more middies. So it's not about whether it's threes or at the rim. It's just about making the right shots at the right time. That's why you add a KD. Instead of changing your shot profile, you can't just go 10% more threes and win more games. It doesn't work that way. Just doesn't. No, I just think in the modern NBA, you need to take threes. No, I think that Todd Edson, the offense is fine. The offense is third in the league.
Your strengths. Yeah, there's no reason to change what you're elite at.
You don't change the offense just because someone else says take more threes. Well, guess what? If you don't score as many points, you lose. That's it. So threes don't guarantee you scoring more points. They're just a different kind of shot. If you get your points and you're third in the league in offense, stay there. Okay? They're focusing on the wrong side of the ball. Here's how the Suns lost to the Dallas Mavericks and the Milwaukee Bucks. Monty put way too much trust in one-on-one defense, DA against Giannis, and then Mikal Bridges against Luka Doncic. And single defense, whereas if they were switched off, he put Chris Paul on an island against Luka. He put Jay Crowder on an island against Luka. He put DA on an island against Luka. He put JaVale McGee on an island against Luka. Never trap, never double team. Now, Luka has proven he can split double teams and traps, and then, of course, you've got the mismatches on the backside, and he knows how to find them. But, man, no, the offense was fine, Todd. Look at the stats. The offense was fine. It's the defense that completely failed against the Mavs because they couldn't generate. Luka throws turnovers, passes to turnovers, more than just about anybody else in the NBA. Guess what happened against the Suns? He didn't, because the Suns didn't pressure him enough. The Suns needed to have more pressure. They needed to do more creative things defensively against the other team's best player. Defense is what lost the Suns in the playoffs last 2 games, not offense. That's my take.
And also the Footprint Center is cursed. It's as soon as they changed the name, that halfway through the finals, they lost both home games there after a 2-0 start, and then Game 7 happened there. So we need an arena change as well.
An arena change?
Arena name change, yes.
Arena name
Footprint
change.
Center,
Yet another one?
It's cursed, man. Why would you change the name of the arena when you're up 2-0 in the finals?
That was a curse.
I'm
Todd Edson,
I'm a little superstitious, so
I guess, but why is our team the only team that isn't adjusting to the modern NBA? I think we're just hyper-focused on our own team, guys. The Suns, guess how many playoff wins the Suns have compared to the rest of the league in the last 2 years? More than anybody, tied with the Bucks. Guess how many playoff series the Suns have won in the last 2 years? More than anybody, tied with the Bucks. So the Bucks have one more playoff win. Bucks have one more playoff win, and no more series wins. Nobody else has come close. So to say the Suns don't adjust at all is wrong. I just think the key was that they didn't adjust enough on the other team's best player. Monty put too much trust in one-on-one defense against top 5 league players. So that's where I think the difference is. Okay, my next question for you guys in the chat, as well as Brandon. Do we think, how much of a worry is it? What's our biggest worry spot? What's the biggest thing you're worried about with this 22-23 Suns? What's the thing that you are laying awake at night worried is going to happen next year?
I think it's kind of the obvious thing right now is just Chris Paul falling off a cliff. If that happens, this team really, especially if they don't get Durant, we're just kind of out of any offensive options. And that's, hopefully Mikal or DeAndre can take another, both of them take a leap along with Cam Johnson. But yeah, I think Chris Paul aging just really changes the whole dynamic of the team. And then also rebounding and just, big wing defenders that's kind of just been the theme, like that the lack of size, as Sawbuck said in the chat, that's definitely something that outside of DeAndre, we just don't have a lot of physicality and people that want to go get the rebound, throwing people around, just doing the dirty work. So I think those are the two main things. But I think if Chris Paul falls off a cliff and plays like he did kind of towards the in portions of the playoffs last year, then this team is capped out.
All right. So in the chat, we've got Sawbuck's lack of size that you already mentioned. Mark Clavel says backup point guard. Todd Edson, creators besides Book and Paul. That's absolutely true. They're all these things are true. Lack of leadership on the second team. I do have a little bit of a worry about that, although I'm less worried because Dario's coming back. A true sixth man, I think you're underestimating Cam Johnson, but that's okay. Cam has to prove it more and more. Dean St. Louis, CP3 injuries, DA with an island attitude. CP3 injuries or just falling off a cliff, that is a huge worry. I agree with you there. Your biggest worry, Michael Lockhart, is that Disney takes over the Suns? No, I think that's fine. Just bring Iron Man onto the team. We're good. CP3 playoff jinx. It's funny. You just cannot expect CP3 to win you series in the playoffs consistently every series. He won the first round for the Suns. He won the second round for the Suns a year ago. He helped win the third round, the Western Conference Finals. He's a great player, and he's going to continue being good, but he can't be your number 2. He needs to be your number 3 or 4 now at this stage, and then you love it when he steps up and has one of those games. You can't rely on it. I agree with that. But playoff jinx, I think he is just so heliocentric as a ball handler that he becomes his own jinx because he's not quite good enough to carry you over the top. He's a top 15 player, not a top 5 player. The Suns will need Devin Booker to carry them if they're going to win, and they're not going to make any other changes. So Liz Nichols, Chris Paul going down. Yeah, if he has a long-term injury that stays an injury and hits in the playoffs, that's a problem. For sure. Cam Payne making layups is your biggest worry. I don't think that lost the Suns anything, but sure was frustrating, wasn't it? I wish Cam Payne would figure out how to do that again. I wish he'd figure out how to make threes again. I do think we might see a bounce back season from Cam Payne this year. I really hope so. I think that'll solve the backup point guard. My biggest worry spot for the Suns is their mentality. I know I'm carrying it forward, right? They lost their good mentality at the end of this past year and they couldn't recover. I think a whole summer of trade rumors for everybody on the roster not named Devin Booker could weigh on this team because none of them feel like they're there for the long haul. Anybody could be traded, even if it's only for KD and you understand it and you would do it yourself. It's still unsettling. So a whole summer of trade rumors. DA, is he in the right frame of mind next year, even though he's got his long-term contract? I do worry about that, and that's going to require Monty's skill as a coach, as a leader, to get these guys on the same page and caring about the future of the Suns when the Suns were willing to trade just about any of them for KD. You understand it, but you don't want to be that guy.
That's why I want that trade to happen before the season starts. If it does, just get that distraction out of the way. And like, this is our team. We're rolling in with, the trade is done. But if it doesn't get done and KD is still hanging out in Brooklyn and that's looming over them like throughout the beginning of the season, that's definitely a distraction, 100%.
All right, let's move on to our true false section. Again, we want the chatter to participate in this. Brandon, I'm going to let you run this section. So you guys are going to vote true or false in the chat, and we'll share everybody's answers.
All right, the first one, Jay Crowder tweeted about change recently. It was kind of like, looked like a little subtweet. Was that a subtle trade request or hinting at a trade to come? True or false?
You know what? He could easily have just been messing with us.
Hang on, let me add this real quick. He also liked a couple tweets semi-recently of him in other jerseys or other teams like talking about wanting to acquire him. So that adds to like the whole, drama, if you will. So I had to throw that in for
Yeah,
context.
sure. Jay's been on 3,000 teams. He's been on about 6 teams in his career. If I'm worried about the Suns coming back with hangovers from trade rumors over the summer, he's the one I'd be least worried about besides Chris Paul. Him and Chris Paul will be just fine mentally. Mental strength is there for these guys. So the reason for that, and I think that. So if I think that, then I don't think that was a trade request or him just getting tired of being considered in trade rumors and now he wants a change. I think it's most likely that I think it's false. I think it's most likely that Jay Crowder was having fun with this and he probably cut his hair.
Yeah, and I agree. I think in the offseason, stories like that will always get overblown, especially this time of offseason where there's nothing going on. So I agree. I think it's probably just something that happened in his day-to-day life or maybe, relationship or something like that. Who knows? But I don't think it's like an Eric Bledsoe, I don't want to be here situation by any means.
Ted Lubin, Sawbucks, Perplex Damage, Los Suns all agree on false. We don't think it was a trade request. Jay's just too mature, too veteran to throw that kind of thing out there without having fun with it.
Yeah. All right. Number 2, true or false, this current Suns core is good enough to win a championship without a splashy move.
Without a splashy move, yes. But it would require major further growth from Book, DA, and Mikal. They're all going to have to grow noticeably again if the Suns are going to stay with the same. But that is the 4 with Chris Paul that would, without a major move, carry them to a championship. I think this current core is good enough to win a championship. Will they? Who the heck knows? There's 6 teams, 7 teams, 8 teams out there good enough to win a championship. The question here, is it good enough to win a championship? I say yes. This core is. Will they? I say probably not. Because if you've got 8 teams good enough to win a championship, only one of them can. But I definitely think they're good enough.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they're not doing themselves any favors by not going out and making a move like that to put them over the top. But I think they're in the conversation, which is, like you said, there's a lot of teams that are in that conversation and a lot of things have to break right for you to win a championship. So I think as long as they continue to get better and we see some leaps from Mikal and Ayton and Cam, they're definitely in that conversation, but it's not, I think, obviously making a big move like a KD is the realistic path to like actually being a title contender where, you're not only just a contender, like you're most likely the favorite at that point. So that's the difference. So I'll go true, but a lot of stuff has to go their way to get there again.
So in our chat, we've got Ted Lubin, so says Jay, Michael Lockhart, all saying true. Perplex Damage says false. He doesn't think this team is good enough to win a championship. So says Jay, of course, no COVID. Yes, true. Liz isn't even voting. She just says trade to come. So she's got the inside, I guess. Todd Eason false. Todd doesn't think this team is good enough to win a championship. Again, I'm not saying the Suns will. I'm just saying they're good enough to. But so are 6 or 8 other teams. Dean St. Louis says true. Todd Edsing says West got better. Yeah, every year West gets better. Every year. The Suns won the West 2 years ago, and they had the best record in the West this past year. Los Suns false. So Cam J is a huge wild card, Ted Lubin says. So Michael Travis says true. Liz Nichols says true, but. So, okay, that's good enough. That's good enough for me. We have a majority thinking that, yes, they are good enough to win a championship, but I doubt everybody thinks they're the prohibitive favorite, which they would be if they acquired Kevin Durant.
Yep. All right. Next one. The Suns still have the best backcourt in the NBA.
True, because Devin Booker is the best shooting guard in the NBA, and Chris Paul is still an all-NBA caliber all-star. Absolutely, I think they have the best backcourt in the NBA. Will they play like it this coming year? We don't know. But right now, yes. Both guys are all NBA in that backcourt.
Yeah, I agree 100%. A lot of people are probably like give the Warriors a shout out, but Clay's, like you mentioned earlier, he's not the same at all. Steph is still incredible and aging very well. So they're in the conversation for sure with, Phoenix, and Atlanta kind of enters the discussion a little bit with Murray and Trey. Harden and Maxey, just, it depends on which Harden shows up. There's some decent backcourts, but I think the Suns are, at this point, the best backcourt in the league.
Yep, we got all trues in the chat. Liz, Mark Clavel, Sawbucks, Todd Edson, Los Suns, Michael Lockhart, Esteban, all saying true. The Suns still have the best backcourt in the NBA. I will say Devin Booker beat out Steph Curry for All NBA first team. So even then, you've got that difference. So yes, I definitely think so. At this point, will they play like it next year? We'll find out.
Yep. All right. Next question. True or false? DeAndre Ayton will get more offensive freedom this season. And I know it's tough to guess that without any trades being finalized. So let's just assume they run it back with this roster currently. So I'll repeat that again. True or false? DeAndre Ayton will get more offensive freedom this season, assuming nothing changes.
First of all, welcome to Nelson Clark. Yep, it's only 1 a.m. where you are. Boom, you're in. This is thank you for joining our live show. So the question is, will DeAndre Ayton get more offensive freedom? I think yes. I think you're going to see a little bit of a new tone from Monty Williams this year. I think all last year, Monty was frustratingly dismissive of any extra offense by DA. Frustratingly dismissive. Even in the postseason chat, he said he wanted to really grow the offensive games of their guards. But Monty was talking in context of shot creation. They're going to work with DA, I think, and they're going to hope that DA, and they're going to give DA an opportunity to show that he can create off the dribble. Will that be as effective? We don't know until we try. And they have to be willing to suffer through some growing pains. But DA is definitely their third most talented offensive player. He just is. So they need to get the most out of that. And they've got that long-term commitment with him. And they certainly don't want him thinking about trade requests. The guy has a note, obviously cannot be traded until mid-January. He has veto power for a full year. He had to get the Pacers to make the offer to get him that max contract. All that stuff could put DA in a bad mood. But if you tell him, but you know what, we're gonna do you right. We're gonna make you a bigger part of the offense this year, and that's gonna make DA happy. So I think that's gonna happen. I think he's gonna get more freedom this year. Will it by playoff time regress back? No, I think he's going to be his best offensive season this year for sure. The key is he's got to also keep rebounding and play defense as well. So I say true. What do you say?
I say true as well. I think this will be the year he breaks that 20-point mark. And this is, like I said, assuming there's no KD. I think the team's going to rely on him more, and just his maturity and hopefully, with the dust settling from the extension and, the team believing in him a little more, I think this could be the year he breaks that 20-point mark consistently, just because outside of, Book, they don't really have, Chris Paul can score when he wants to, but he prefers to set people up. So I think they're going to need DeAndre to take that next step. And they know this, like that. If they hit their highest ceiling, it's, obviously Booker can take them where they want to go, but DeAndre is kind of that X factor that, when he's clicking, this team is just completely different. So hopefully they treat him that way, and he has his best season yet.
Yeah, a few people are commenting in the chat that the pattern is when he has his good games, it's because he scored most of his points in the first half, and then he gets ignored in the second half. Absolutely true. That's got to change. They've got to do stuff to change that this next year and balance out those scoring opportunities for him. But that's on Monty Williams. That's on Chris Paul. That's got to happen. You've got to get the most out of your third best player for sure.
Yeah. And I think him attacking off the dribble too. I was just going to say, him attacking off the dribble, like with how quick he is at his size and how defenses are just not expecting it. Like that's an easy area, I think. And we've seen it like every once in a while. He'll catch defenses off guard and just take it to the rim and throw it down. It's like, we need more of that. Even if it doesn't lead to him getting to the rim, just kicking it out, or even if he gets called for a charge. I would love to see that more. I think that's the next evolution in his game is just beating, slower players off the dribble, and with defenses sagging off him, eventually stepping out and hitting that three consistently. We've seen it a little bit more. So I think there's still a lot more to his game offensively. It's just, I don't know if it's going to all come together at once, but if it just continues to slowly get better, then, that's, you got to be patient with the 23-year-old. Well, 24 now, I guess.
Barely. Just turned 24.
Yeah.
P-Dog's having fun at the chat at Robert Sarver's expense. I just think it's a little funny, and I'm going to use the Suns ownership group, not just Sarver, but the Suns have spent more money this past 12 months than they've ever spent ever on players. They kept everyone. They gave everyone their big contracts. He's not still cheap. He's just not. He may not be a good owner, but he's not cheaping out. He's paying the money.
Yeah,
okay, your last true false.
All right, last one. True or false, Kevin Durant will start the season in Brooklyn.
Look, this is the thing. The only team Kevin Durant will be happy to play for would be the Phoenix Suns. He might be talked into being happy to be playing for the Nets again. But while the Nets can trade Kevin Durant to any team in the NBA, he won't re-sign with. He'll be happy. The re-signing isn't an issue. He's under contract for 4 years. But you don't want an unhappy superstar. You don't want a guy who doesn't want to be there. So now Todd Edson, we would have heard it already. No, actually, these guys are all taking vacations right now. If something's going to happen, it'll happen early September. The Nets are going to try to talk Kevin Durant into wanting to stay. They're going to bide their time. They're going to wait it out. He still could be traded. Having said all that, I do think he stays in Brooklyn because the Nets want more in return. And then they'll see how the season starts. And if they start below 500 or at 500 for the Nets, then you'll see trades come back. So it's either going to be September before training camp, or it's going to be more like January or February. But I do think the odds are growing that he starts the season in Brooklyn. So I'm going to go ahead and say true.
Yeah, at this point, that's what it seems like it's trending towards. And I think, honestly, I believe the Rudy Gobert trade ruined the NBA offseason. I think that expectation just completely shattered what the value of players really is. And Donovan Mitchell and Kevin Durant would have been traded by now if that Gobert trade didn't happen. That's my semi-hot take. It's probably not even a hot take, honestly. I just think that teams are going to hold out for more now because they expect.
Somebody made a comment that, oh shoot. Yeah. Okay. Somebody made a comment that Danny Ainge's trade history is if he's completely pulling the wool over your eyes, completely devastating you, then he'll agree to the trade. Otherwise he won't. And that's what happened when he did the trade of Durant and Paul Pierce to the Nets. He completely shellacked those guys. And then this trade to Minnesota, completely shellacked. He's not going to accept anything less than a shellacking. So I think Donovan Mitchell is not going to the Knicks, and I wonder if he is even going to get traded because Danny doesn't do even trades. He just doesn't. Another funny thing I heard was on the SI Now podcast, the guy goes, let's talk about the Phoenix Suns for a second. What if you said, let's run it back with a championship contender, but let's do it in the most uncomfortable way possible? That's how the Suns did it, by doing all these trade rumors and the holdouts and all that stuff. And it is true. And that is what I'll worry about the most. I do think Kevin Durant stays in Brooklyn. Todd Eason, you're right. If I'd have read your comment correctly, I would agree with you, and I do agree with you, that the first thing the Nets would have leaked is that meeting with Joe Tsai would have come out that Kevin Durant is happy staying in Brooklyn. So because we didn't hear anything, I think it's probably that his stance is unchanged. But we just don't know if he's going to refuse to play for Brooklyn or not. That's what would actually be a deciding factor on whether the Nets are forced to take a lesser deal. Okay, so that's it for our true-false section. Thank you so much, everyone. Hour 15 into this. I appreciate you all's time coming in today. I do want to point out it's been a year since the solar panel split. For 5 years before that, Espo and I, with Tim Tompkins for 3 of those, 4 of those, and then Saul Bookman for a year, did the solar panel here on Saturday mornings with you, live streaming the last 3 or 4 of those. And we broke up because those guys wanted to start a whole network. They wanted it to be a full-time weekday thing. They have done a great job at PHNX. I have a different full-time job. I couldn't have gone with them. And I had a choice. I could have quietly just slid into retirement. That was the running joke of how I'm getting old because I have some gray hair. I could have just slid into retirement and let the solar panel die. But I didn't want to. I wanted to keep it going. And I'm really happy a year later to still be here. And I got extremely lucky to get a new partner for the show in Brandon, Zona Hoops. And I'm really happy for you this past year becoming the media relations manager for the Arizona Rattlers. I'm sorry their season ended in heartbreaking fashion like the Suns always do. And like the Mercury a year ago in the finals. I'm sorry you guys are just now suddenly part of the Footprint Center curse where you get everyone's hopes up and then dash them.
Yep. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's been an awesome. It's great to see you keep this show alive, and I'm happy to be a part of that. And yeah, only better things ahead, I think, as we continue to grow. And yeah, like I said, the Footprint Center curse is real. Between the Suns, Mercury, and now Rattlers, it's a tough time to be an Arizona sports fan, but we'll get there.
It is tough. It's fun to be an Arizona sports fan until it's not. How about
yes.
that? Which is why your comment earlier, we need to change Footprint Center to something else, because all these finals losses have happened. All these championship game losses have happened since it became Footprint Center. Thank you guys for your support, staying around here for this past year. I got to change solar panel a little bit. We now have more guests on, more interesting third-party takes, people who aren't just all Suns all the time. I like doing that because I allow, we do mostly have a third person. It's okay not to have a third person. I think Brandon and I are a great team, but I do like having guests, and I like that being rotating. I don't want it to be the same person every week because then you get stale, I think. So I do like the rotating third guest. It adds a little more work to us, but that's okay. And so I'm glad you guys are still here a year later. Our listenership, I had to start all over again because Espo took all the whole network with him. This past year, we've grown and we've gotten big again, and I really appreciate you guys being around. Yep, Suns Jam Session is a great podcast as well. There's a lot of great Suns podcasts out there, and I'm really glad you guys are here with us. And we'll see you again soon. If you're listening on the podcast, please do us a big favor. Leave us a 5-star review. We haven't had a review in a while. We've gotten great reviews. Love the reviews. Love the rating on the show. If you're still listening right now, you love the show. Please, on the audio feed in Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. Leave us a 5-star rating. I'd very much appreciate that. Thank you so much for still being around. And we're looking for another great year here together. Brandon, thank you for joining me on as partner here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And we'll see you all next week when we come back.